Hello, I'm at NetEvents, the place where press and vendors meet to talk about the telecoms and networking issues of the day. And one of the key issues that's taking enterprises by storm is the bring your own device phenomenon, BYOD. And that's why it's one of the keynote speeches that's going to be given here today by Shehzad Merchant, who's the VP of Technology at Extreme Networks. Take it away, Shehzad.
Glad to see a full house. Everybody made it in time. I trust everybody had a good night's sleep last night. Well, welcome to another fantastic day here in Miami. This is a great event. So today's topic is around bring your own device, BYOD, and some of the challenges faced, particularly from a networking perspective, and what can the network do to evolve, to accommodate and actually participate in what is really the consumerization of IT. It's really a fascinating time today in the industry. People are accessing the data, their content from whatever device they have at their disposal, from whatever location they are at, and using whatever technology they have at their disposal, whether it's a cellular, 2G, 3G, 4G, whether it is Wi-Fi, or whether it is wired technology. And so all of these inflection points are happening as we speak. They're all happening together in parallel, and they're fundamentally driving towards a new breed of networks. One that is optimized for this new world of user, device, and application mobility. Now, this whole trend to BYOD, bring your own device, it's a positive trend. It's really leading to productivity enhancements. People are far more connected today to their applications. They're far more responsive to what's going on in their enterprise networks. They're far more aware of any challenges and are able to respond very quickly. What's also happening is it is forcing a certain behavioral change, right? People are now doing this very instinctively. We are checking our emails constantly. We are checking our applications constantly. And so it's actually becoming second nature to a lot of us to constantly pull out our device and check what's going on. If you look at the flip side of this, which is the IT side of things, right? So that's the user side. If you look at the IT side of things, there are significant challenges. Clearly, security is a big challenge, right? Which is, for the IT administrator, it's not clear who's the user behind that device. It is very common for us to share our devices with other people for a variety of reasons. And those personal devices have now become enterprise computing devices. And so it's not very clear when somebody's accessing your enterprise applications, if somebody's accessing your enterprise data, who's the person behind that? And really, what are they doing behind that device, right? So it's a big threat today. It's a black hole, so to speak, right? The other challenge for the IT side is pure management overhead. Many of us today actually have multiple screens, right? I have 3 screens that I commonly use: my laptop, my tablet, and my smartphone. Right? Some people have 4 screens. They have a desktop, laptop, smartphone, tablet. And this is very commonplace. And the traditional way of managing all of this is simply proving to be too cumbersome. It's adding a lot of overhead in terms of managing individual devices and all the users behind those devices as well. Right? And this is just one aspect of what's going on. The other big change that's happening, and we are all in the midst of this, is also that the workforce is changing. Right? The workforce today is a collaborative workforce, and it's a global workforce. You have employees, you have consultants, you have contractors, all accessing the network from multiple locations and from multiple devices. Right? And so the complexity of dealing with all this is a pretty significant challenge for the IT side. Now, when you think about all of these challenges, the question is, how should the solution look like, and what can the network do to participate in all of this? Can the network do anything, right? And so any framework for a solution actually has to consider both sides of the challenge, right? One is the user side, which is, what does this user actually want, right? That's very clear. All users want to be onboarded very quickly, right? We want on-demand access to our applications, to our data, to our content, without IT dependency. I don't want to have to reach out to IT every time I add a new device. I don't want to have to talk to my IT department every time at a new location. I simply want immediate and seamless access. Now, for the IT department, there's a different challenge, right? For them, what they really need is they want complete visibility and complete control into every device that's on the network, the users behind that device, and what exactly is that user doing, right? That visibility and control is missing today, quite frankly, right? And that's the challenge, which is if I have a device, who's the user behind that device, right? And if I have multiple devices, where are they accessing the network and what applications are they accessing from? So all that visibility is missing today, particularly from a networking perspective, and that's the problem that really needs to get solved. Now, the key to all of this is automation, right? Because if you add the number of users, you add the consultants, contractors, and the devices, doing this in a manual approach simply doesn't scale or simply doesn't work. And so automation is really the key to solving all of this. And the way to think about this is to have a centralized approach where you specify once, where you put your policies in place, and then the network can automatically enforce that in whatever location, whatever device, whatever technology you're coming in from. So where is the network today, right? How does it map to these challenges, right? Which is seamless on-demand access for the user, and at the same time, complete control and visibility for the IT side. Unfortunately, today's network environment is pretty static, right? The world has moved on. Virtualization is dynamic, mobility is dynamic. The one piece of the IT department today that's very static is still the network, right? The networking world is still mired in IP addresses, MAC addresses, VLANs. You configure things on a manual basis. That hasn't evolved very quickly, and that's a challenge. Typically, access to applications has been managed at the application server, right? So if you have a bunch of users and they want to access the data, that access is controlled typically at the application servers through groups and privileges, and this is pretty common. In the meanwhile, if you have some malicious users or some unknown users coming in, they are also controlled, right? That access is also controlled, but it is controlled at the application servers through groups and rights and privileges. But in the meanwhile, you've opened your entire network infrastructure to those users. And the analogy is you've put a lock on your bedroom door, but you've in effect kept your front door open, right? So people can walk through your entire house. They won't get into your bedroom, but your entire house is open, right? And that's not the right approach. What really needs to happen is that the network needs to participate in this, right? And the access needs to be controlled at the entry point to the network, right? If you can do that effectively, and the key over here is do that in a completely seamless way, where there is no change required in the user behavior. There's no agent required for the user to go download. There's no portal that the user has to go to. But if you can do that in a completely seamless way, you free up your entire network infrastructure from this chatter that's going on in the background. So how do you do this, right? If this is the objective, how do you go about doing this? Well, the good thing is it's actually pretty easy, right? The network today is fundamentally a pipe. People are thinking of the network as a way to efficiently move bits and bytes. But those bits and bytes that are moving across the network carry all the information that we really need, right? And so what the network could do is it can participate in that information, right? So let's walk through this example. You have a user. Most of us have used Microsoft Control-Alt-Delete. Everybody's familiar with logging in. User comes in and logs in. Well, the network doesn't see any of the passwords that goes on the network. Everything's encrypted. But who that user is, that information is going through the network, right? So when a user logs into the network, into a Windows domain as an example, that information can be very easily picked up by the network. Now the switching infrastructure immediately knows, hey, this is John who's logging in. He's coming in on this IP address. He's coming on this location, this port, this VLAN, and that information is immediately available. As the user login is successful, the network can also detect that information, and it can open up access based on the fact that the user's login has been successful. So now you know exactly who's coming in, what location they're coming in, what device they're coming in on, right? And it's very easy because the information is already flowing through the network. You just have to be a little more aware of what's really going on. Now, if you look at this model of a centralized intelligence model with distributed enforcement, that begins to look very similar to SDN, isn't it? Right? This whole notion of centralizing intelligence, of being able to specify your policies, being able to specify what you want to do in the network once, and then have distributed enforcement, it lends itself very nicely to this SDN model, right? the basic principles behind the whole SDN model is this notion of a separate control and data plane, right? Which is what we're talking about here for the consumerization of IT, right? You take the intelligence, right? You separate that out, you separate the control plane information and centralize that. Once you do that, you can actually specify your policies in a very, very much human-like language. You can specify it once, becomes a very flexible framework. The enforcement becomes distributed and becomes completely automated, right? And so these principles of separation of control and data plane, centralizing network intelligence, abstracting the network infrastructure. This is also a very critical piece of information here, right? Which is my network infrastructure consists of multiple devices. I have access points, I have physical switching infrastructure, I have routers. If I can abstract all of that, right, what I really want to get to is the fact that I have this human-like policy saying user X is a student coming in from a dorm, coming in from this particular device, Xbox gaming device, give him X amount of policies. I don't care that much that he's coming in on an access point. I don't care that much that he's coming in on a wired Ethernet switch. So if I can provide this level of network abstraction, then my policy specification becomes very flexible, right? And it becomes very human-like. And that's really the end goal of the solution over here. Right? Once you can do that network abstraction, then you can provide the programmability to go achieve what you really want to achieve. So this is the end goal. We are very hopeful that the industry will move towards this. We very much would like to see this happen. And it is through these basic principles that you can truly go solve your consumerization of IT, your BYOD challenge, and make the network an integral part of the solution. All right, well, thank you very much. And if you have any questions later on, I'm happy to take those offline as well.
So, great keynote, wasn't it? Shehzad's with me to answer just a couple of questions. Shehzad, thanks very much for joining me. So tell me, first of all, I'm interested to know why I'd want to do what you're talking about. Aren't I just duplicating security structures if I add all this network access control? And isn't it just something else to go wrong?
That's a good question. Now, anytime you think about security, by definition, a good security solution is always multi-tiered, which means that you have to have multiple layers of security. The analogy I would give, and I talked about this as well, is if you have a lock on your bedroom door, doesn't mean you don't have a lock on your front door. You have to secure multiple layers. The best place to start with security is at the access to the network, and that is why we are big advocates of having network-based security and a solution that's completely and seamlessly integrated into the network itself.
Shehzad, you talked about SDN, software-defined networking, as one of the key enablers of security, but can't you do all the kinds of things we've talked about already without SDN?
Certainly. However, what is important to understand is that the environment has changed today. Today, the workforce has changed. You have employees, you have consultants, contractors, guests, all part of the workforce. And all of these users have multiple devices as well. And one of the best ways to scale your solution is to be able to centralize key aspects of your security solution and provide a centralized view, centralized control into what happens in the network. And the second key aspect of it is to be able to define your policies once and have the network go off and enforce it automatically, right? And SDN is fundamentally based on that principle, which is centralize key aspects of your intelligence and provide that level of separation between your enforcement, your data plane, and between the centralized control plane. So I think SDN is a great way to look at solving some of these challenges around BYOD and more broadly the consumerization of IT.
Shehzad, thank you very much indeed. Thanks very much for joining us. And so you heard it here first. Bring your own device. It's going to be big.